Welcome to Your Soul's Therapist podcast. I'm your host, Vlada de Souza. This show is on a mission to offer you a space to understand yourself more deeply, expand your worldview, heal your heart, and elevate your energy. If you're looking for safe and grounded tools to support your healing journey, then this show is for you. I hope you enjoy today's episode. My guest today is Kevin Turner, a man who has dedicated over 30 years to the ancient art of shamanic healing. He left the West behind, went deep into Asia, and studied with yogis, monks, lamas before finding his true calling in shamanic practice. Kevin is the director of Asia at the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, a trained remote viewer, university lecturer, and author of the award-winning book The Sky Shaman of Mongolia, and his newest, The Secret Fire of Alchemy. He has worked with indigenous shamans across Mongolia, Nepal, Indonesia, Tibet, Mexico, and Peru. In this conversation, we talk about what shamanism really is at its core. We discuss what is soul loss and soul retrieval, and why so many of us feel like something is missing without knowing exactly why or how to change that. We explore how a single shamanic healing session can sometimes do what years of therapy unfortunately cannot do. And Kevin reminds us that the ability to heal and access spiritual wisdom is absolutely not reserved for quote unquote special people. It actually lives inside every one of us. Enjoy this wonderful episode with Kevin Turner. Kevin, it's been a long time. I was looking forward to this conversation with you. Welcome to your Soul's Therapist podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, very recently, I finally managed to get myself to Bali, timing aligned, and I did a wonderful workshop with you on shamanism. And it's been long coming. And I was honestly sitting with kind of a subtle smile through that workshop because it was such a great pleasure to see how you present shamanism to audience, to people.
Mhm.
And I will go a little bit more specific into what really resonated very much with me. But I would want to invite you to give a little intro into what is core shamanism from your perspective and how you teach it.
Sure. Well, core shamanism is the distillation of common shamanic techniques from around the world. There's a lot of misunderstandings about core shamanism. Core shamanism is a trademark of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. So it has been thrown around a bit in popular parlance, mixing it up with neo shamanism, which it is not neo shamanism. It is the distillation of common techniques from around the world. Neo shamanism is usually a mixture of borrowed and stolen pieces from different tribes. So tribal shamanisms, I will call cultural shamanisms. They have specific cosmologies, specific spirits that they work with, and specific methods that they use in their tribe. So we don't do that. We are doing a essence of shamanic practice, a universal practice. But you see, there's a lot of misunderstanding. Shamanism is humankind's earliest expression of spirituality. So this is not a religion. The religions go back a few thousand years at most, but shamanism goes back tens of thousands of years. And shamanism is actually not an ism. Ism means a belief system. Shamanism is not concerned with belief. Shamanism is concerned with effective results. In other words, actually operating in spiritual realities. Shamans serve their communities. Shamans give up a portion of their life in order to serve their communities, but it is not a matter of just believing. Again, shamans need to get results from healing results from divination, and then the community will continue to make use of them and go to them.
And
So
I
shaman.
just want to pause here for a second and really highlight this point that it's not based on a set of rules and beliefs. And like you're saying, if what the shaman does is not working, then no one will go to that shaman. And the point is that it has actual results that people can experience and see in themselves or in their life. And that's what makes it so honest and real to people, that you can just experience it and you don't need to believe in something.
Mhm. Well, shamans have been helping humanity survive for tens of thousands of years. So if we go back 20,000 years, 30,000 years, 70,000 years in Australia, they are now saying, possibly even 90,000 years, shamans have been doing healing and divination for their communities for survival. Indigenous communities still today, where shamanism is still living, the shamans are helping their community to survive. Often there are no doctors deep in the jungle or far in the Arctic or far in the desert. And so shamans are addressing the spiritual aspect of an illness or problem, the spiritual origin, the spiritual roots. And we're in good company. They've been doing this for tens of thousands of years, and because they get results, they have been inconvenient to fixed belief systems, also known as the great religions.
That's
Now, what's
right.
funny is the great religions are all based on great prophets who lived long ago, who I see as shamans. It is said that religion is born when the last shaman in that lineage dies, because then we only have the stories of the miracle workers from thousands of years ago. And then it becomes a legend in the tribe that, oh, only they could do these miracles, but not in living shamanism. The job of the shaman is miracles. That is their profession. So Dr. Michael Harner, the founder of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, asks two questions to determine if someone is a shaman. And that is, do they journey to other worlds in an altered state of consciousness? And do they perform miracles? If the answer to both is yes, then he would consider that person a shaman. So, shaman's journey, which not all healers do. There are many kinds of healers, many kinds of psychics, many kinds of remote viewers, many ritualists, spiritualists, priests, etc. Not all of them journey. So in anthropology, we make a distinction between shamans and the other types. It doesn't mean they don't do good work. It's just easier to keep it clean like this. Now, the word shaman, of course, comes from Central Asia, and not all cultures use that word. That has just been borrowed into Russian and then into German and then later into English, not really used worldwide. Native Americans prefer to be called medicine women or medicine men as opposed to shamans. Some Native American medicine men and women do journey, some don't. So these definitions are really more of an academic issue. The real point is that shamans serve their communities. But wonderful thing about shamanism is that it is spiritual autonomy. So especially in the foundation courses, our goal is spiritual autonomy. No one needs to believe anything. You go and find out for yourself. And in fact, even better, you are going to the places where the founders of the great religions went in order to get their revelations. Now, people like to believe that only someone who's very special and very talented can do that. And in fact, in some countries like Mongolia, they love to say, oh, shamanic journeying is so difficult. You have to be born a shaman in order to be able to do with it, be able to do that. Well, the shaman is the specialist, just like a professional musician is a specialist. But that doesn't mean no one can play music. Any human being can play music.
I'm so in awe of this part of what you're saying. And it's like number one on my list of what I really feel I want to highlight about what you're saying, because it doesn't take away people's power and tells them you need to pay this person to do this healing for you, what you're saying that there is a specialist in this area where you can go and receive the healing, but ultimately that every person in them have a capability and ability to journey. And I want to unpack what is a journey, but to journey and find answers, find healings for themselves, which I experienced myself very vividly and had a really special journeys during the workshop in Bali.
Mm.
And that gives power to the person instead of taking that
Yeah.
power away. And what is required? What is like the beginner's shaman? Like you
Well,
teach
people
people in the basic
read
course.
books. Sure, people can read books. They can even listen to videos, listening to drum beats. But I have found that coming to an in-person course is best. Even 2 days of training, theoretically, once you connect to the helping spirits, the transcendent spirits, the angels, the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, what have you, they can teach you everything. So theoretically, one could take nothing but a 2-day course, learn to journey into the transcendent worlds, and then make your connections in the transcendent worlds. Some tribes will call them ancestors, others will call them angels, other will call them something else. These are the intermediaries between us and cosmic union or God or the unity consciousness. And we can learn directly from them. Theoretically, you would never need to take another course. In some indigenous traditions, also, it is the teacher shaman's job to simply connect the initiate to the helping spirits. After that, the spirits do all the teaching. So, in fact, I'm not really even the teacher. I'm more like a shamanic technical help desk. I give hints, I give suggestions, I manage the course, I give a lot of information about what indigenous shamans do around the world. And then we have core practices. But people will build their own cosmology, they will build their own experience. So, this is shamanism from scratch. We don't come in and say you have to do it the Cherokee way or the Mongolian way or the Siberian way or the South American Amazonian way. No, no, no. That's neo shamanism. That's where there's a lot of confusion. So we're not doing that. We are doing the essence of human shamanism, and then you build your own lineage. All lineages began somewhere. All lineages began somewhere. They didn't just fall out of the sky. Well, maybe they did fall out of the sky, but what I mean, they fell out of the sky to some person, and then the lineage went on from there. Over the centuries, of course, it became traditions and taboos and beliefs, and somebody later might have written a story about shamans who do miracles. And then, if those shamans didn't have any students that could still continue to do those miracles, then it became a written down story. And then you got a priesthood to interpret the story. And then you had to build a building to keep the priesthood. And suddenly you have a religion. Now, it's not that religion is right or wrong, it's just religion is an old story of the miracle shamans from before.
That's right.
So, for
This is so well put.
so
Yes.
the the missionaries going down into the Amazon, they were trying to missionize, trying to Christianize the native Amazonians. Well, the Amazonians loved the stories of Jesus, and they would call him Jesus shaman this, and Jesus shaman that. And the missionaries would say, "Oh, no, no, no. There's only one shaman, and that's Jesus." And they would scratch their heads and say, "We don't understand because our shamans are doing the same miracles of the story of your shaman. So we like the stories of the foreign shaman." Anyway, so
That's right.
they
It's
especially
very classical
liked.
Western approach to then package everything and create a hierarchy and build business around it. But yeah, coming back to the practicality of the shamanic, that we, as humans, we all possess that. It's all in us. Some, of course, have a little bit more maybe inclination towards being psychic or but ultimately it's in us. What actually the journeying, what actually makes a shaman shaman?
Mhm. What makes the shaman a shaman? The shaman is an intermediary. The shamans work directly with the powers of the universe in order to affect change. So, in other words, shamans are not fatalists. A fatalist, if you went to a shaman who was a fatalist, you'd say, "Oh, I'm ill, I need help." And the shaman would say, "That's your fate, go away." But they are not fatalists. They believe that fate can be changed. That's why they're miracle workers. So,
Can we double click on they believe fate can be changed?
well, what that means is that they don't believe there is a fate.
So what do
It
they
is
believe?
instead, well, they don't believe they know. That's the whole point.
I just want to pause here for a moment and let you know that if you feel called to go deeper on your healing journey and you need someone safe, someone who can truly support you, I'd love to invite you to explore my signature program, Untangle, or my one-to-one retreats and private healing work. You will find all the details in the show notes or on my website, vladadesouza.com. Don't be shy. You're always welcome to connect with me in person through a complimentary call. And now, back to the episode.
Shamans know. And in fact, some shamans in different tribes are actually called one who knows, one who knows outside of time and space. So there may be probable futures or probable outcomes. Shamans don't cure 100% of all illnesses. Of course not. No one can guarantee that. Even in a modern hospital, you go there, no one can guarantee they're going to solve your problem 100%. People die every day, and the doctors don't save them. Same thing with shamans. People die every day. But shamans can affect change, and they will do everything they can to help a client to recover by addressing the spiritual aspect. Now, the good thing about shamanism, or at least the shamanism that we are teaching, and is that it's completely complementary with all other systems. So it's fine to go to a Western doctor, Ayurvedic doctor, Chinese doctor, and see a shaman. There's no problem at all because the shaman is only addressing the spiritual aspect. Now, there may be other traditions where they mix it together. They may have a spiritual aspect and then they may have herbs. They may have spiritual aspect plus acupuncture, or they may have a spiritual aspect plus mantras from their tradition. So there's every possible variety of spiritual practice.
So, from shamanic perspective, the healing happens in the spirit, in our soul.
Well, that's the beginning. When the soul is out of balance with the body, illness can arise. So whenever there are disharmonies, spiritual disharmonies in the body, then that gives an opportunity for illness to arrive. So it is not a solely materialistic point of view to say, oh, well, you got sick because of a bacteria or a virus, and that's it. Well, no, a healthy immune system can fight off bacteria and viruses. What is out of balance in the body? So, Chinese medicine is more holistic. Ayurvedic Indian medicine is more holistic. It's not looking at just a chemical and a bacteria and a virus, which is typical of Western medicine. It's looking at the whole body. And power is what we consider very important. I'm talking about spiritual vitality in terms of power. Okay, so we can call this prana, we can call it chi, we can call it ki, but we call it spiritual vitality because in English we don't really have a better word. But more simply put, power. This is not power over others. This is the spiritual vitality, the life force, or as Yoda would say, use the force. Luke and from Star Wars. Anyway, the life force. So shamans are working with the life force of the universe. And where is it out of balance with the life force of the individual? And if the
Very
power
interesting.
field is weak, they are vulnerable to illness, disease, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, everybody knows if you don't get enough sleep, your immune system goes weak, and eventually you'll probably catch a cold or the flu or something else. But if you get enough sleep, you eat well, you are very resistant to catching those things that are around us all the time. Well, that's in a sense very spiritual, really. You're managing your spiritual vitality. Everybody knows that. However, the shaman is the specialist in the subtle realms. The shamans work in objective spiritual realms to actually be able to perceive the disharmonies, to be able to remove them or adjust them, or even to bring back portions of your consciousness that may even have left due to trauma.
That's
Everybody knows the word dissociation. You have a trauma, you go numb for a while. You're not hungry. You can't sleep. You can't feel anything. We call it shock or dissociation. And we all have that in our lives. Sometimes we have little disappointments. We didn't get what we wanted for our birthday. Or some small thing. We might think it's small, but if you're 6 years old, it might be really important. As opposed to, of course, we can go to the extreme PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome. So people who have been beaten or been through battles or violence, great fear. So this can cause dissociation. The shaman can go get these portions and bring them back, these portions
so.
of the consciousness.
I'm really curious if, for example, we travel for a second in our imagination that we are in Amazon, for example, or in any, in any place where we would go to classic, shaman. And
Sure.
a person just says, I don't know, I don't sleep well, I don't feel well, there's something wrong, but they go to doctors, they cannot understand what's happening with me. They say everything's fine, but I'm not okay. And I'm sad, maybe depressed, I don't know. So what would happen from that moment?
Most likely, I mean, there's two options. The shaman would either take a journey to the transcendent worlds and talk to one of their helping spirits and say, what does this client need? Ask, what does this client need? And then the spirit can do the diagnosis. Or, assuming the shaman knows the spirit well, they can invite the spirit from transcendent worlds to here and have an internal telepathic conversation with that spirit and say, what does this client need? Now, there are many kinds of spiritual imbalances that shamans recognize. They talk about spiritual intrusions. So these are spiritual entities that can get into our body, into our power field, into our consciousness field. They can take many forms. The shaman can detect these and remove them. Now, these spiritual intrusions do not show up in blood tests. They do not show up in x-rays.
Such
That
a
little,
heat point that they don't show up
everybody's had,
on blood tests.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, not currently, but there may be tests someday where science and shamanism comes closer and closer together. But right now, because these are non-physical or at least less physical, that they don't show up. But the story of medicine is always finding out that there was something subtler than what we were able to detect, if you just want to look at Western medicine. So it's always every 10 years, there's this almost revolution in being able to detect disharmonies that we could not detect a century ago, or even 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago. And 500 years ago, they were really almost flying blind. But the shaman has the advantage of the spiritual X-ray perception. They can perceive the spiritual imbalances. So there
So
can
one
also
of the
be, I guess.
imbalances is this some kind of intrusions, which in internal family systems therapy, we have a concept of unattached burdens, kind of just
Mhm.
like something in us that is not really us, like
Yeah,
others within us.
that does not belong, we say.
Okay. And what are other?
Well, there can also be what anthropologists misunderstood for a long time, and that is soul loss. The shaman, usually the problem is with interpretation. The shaman will say, oh, this client has lost their soul. Well, to most Western anthropologists, they would think that's not possible because if they lost their soul, they'd be dead. Well, yes, 100% loss of the soul, you're dead. I mean, the body's dead anyway, the soul's not. But in shamanism, they recognize dissociation. And in English, we say, I was beside myself. I was so upset, I'm beside myself. or I was mortified, or I felt like I was going to die. I was scared to death. And actually, the consciousness moves away from the body because it's expecting pain or discomfort or something, and even emotional pain. Okay, so you have an emotional trauma, relationship breaks up, or somebody you get fired, or whatever that you don't you don't get what you wanted. In other words, you got something you didn't want,
Yeah.
which that's life. I mean, there's no way to live here in the middle world, which is where we are, without having some of these disappointments and traumas. And it's perfectly normal. In fact, it is even a kind of fuse. If it's overwhelming, I'm not ready to feel this. It's too overwhelming. So I'm just going to dissociate. Any psychologist can tell you that people are walking around all over the world partially dissociated because they haven't resolved traumas from years ago. Now, in a shamanic community, as soon as someone has a shock or a trauma, the shaman will do a soul portion retrieval within 3 days. But we don't have that done for 20 years. And then when we find out what a mess our lives are, we have to go to a therapist to coax and talk these soul portions back to integrate them into ourselves. If you're lucky, if you get a skilled therapist,
And
shaman can do it like that very
exactly what
quickly.
I remember, you said that for in a shamanic session, which is like called soul retrieval, right? That is a one session. In classic talk therapy, that could be decades of talking
Oh,
that
yes.
piece part of you back into yourself, right?
Yeah. So, bottom line is shamanism saves time and money.
I totally agree with you. And what I just noticed, actually, these two things are very connected. What I noticed is when we dissociate or lose a part of ourselves or lose a piece of our soul, it creates space for something else to to come in.
That also, yes.
So
The
it's
power of being
interesting.
weakened and you're vulnerable to intrusions. So
Exactly.
actually, it can get worse. You get more intrusions, power field becomes weaker. You have a shock, you have more soul loss. You have more soul loss, you're more vulnerable to intrusions. And the cycle goes on and on and on until people just get ill or get cancer and die. And they don't recover, no matter what you do. So, shamanism is fantastic preventative medicine because the shaman can rebalance this stuff before you get deathly or terminally ill or seriously ill. It's fantastic preventative
So
medicine.
from what I'm listening, if at the core of disharmony, therefore a
Mhm.
core of illness, it's either solos and some kind of intrusion, something gets into us, and then again more solos, and therefore maybe it makes sense to go to someone who practices this approach first and fix the basement and then go to see a traditional doctor that will give you pills and do MRI and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Well, it depends because if you have an emergency, if you're bleeding, by all means, go get patched up first. However, it's great to just check in with a shaman who can rebalance things before it shows up in the physical realm. Because I've heard many spiritual healers talk about illness begins in your consciousness field and it only manifests in the physical at a later time because it's been so out of balance for so long. Um, I think some doctors would even agree with that. If there's a weakening of the immune system, then the whole system is weaker, you're more vulnerable. But they just don't want to talk about the spiritual aspect because that's not really allowed in medical schools. And that's considered too woo-woo. So, the shaman, unfortunately, people go to the witch doctor last rather than first. And so when nothing else works, and I experience this almost every day, people arrive, on my doorstep with fourth stage cancer. And the first question is, well, why didn't you come earlier? Oh, well, I was trying all these other treatments. And well, yes, but the recovery rate is a lot better. We start early. Then you may never have had these symptoms. Anyway, Shamans can also work miracles too, but always sooner is better.
That's right. So how do you see there was a suppression of this for some time, right, in our culture? When I was born, no one was talking about this. That was not a topic of conversation. No one heard of that. But recently, I'm hearing shamanic breath work, shamanic this, shamanic healing, shamanic training, shamanic retreat. You know,
Shamanism has become, unfortunately, a fashionable catchword. And most people don't actually know what real shamanism is. They don't have the anthropological basis. They've never studied with actual indigenous shamans, where everything we do here at the foundation is based on what actual indigenous shamans do. In fact, we actively discourage any kind of mixing with modern therapies. We're really trying to do it the way shamans have done it for thousands of years. I would say tens of thousands of years. It's just a little hard to tell. When you go back 10,000 years, we're not really sure what they were doing. But the principles of shamanic practice are the same.
yeah,
The principles are pretty much the same because we as human beings haven't changed that much, especially the last 30,000 years. Our DNA is more or less unchanged. So that's way before the Ice Age. And now they're finding in Morocco, they're finding modern human skulls going back 300,000 years. So we used to think modern human beings are only about 100,000 years old, but now it's back to 300,000 and could be even older. So I'm assuming that shamanism has been around as long as we have.
yeah, because shamanic approach sounds simple and
And
wise
it's
and doable.
natural.
It's
In
natural.
fact, shamanism is actually recovering our soul's intrinsic knowledge. In fact, before you were born, you have soul's intrinsic knowledge when you came into your body. And shamanism is recovering that memory of the bigger picture. That's why many shamans become shamans after they have a near death experience, because they die. They're dead for some period of time, or they're in deep, deep coma, and the spirits take them into the transcendent realms. In other words, they leave the matrix, they get outside this middle world box. They're shown the larger reality, but they don't physically die. So they come back, they're revived, and they come back with the knowledge. So there are many stories of people coming back from coma, coming back from near death experiences, being psychic. Well, that's a classic way to become a shaman is you have a near death experience, you come back and say, the angels came to me, my ancestors came to me, they taught me the big picture, and now I can help others. I know many people came back from near death experiences. They can see the auric fields, or I should say, perceive the auric field. They know where the imbalances are, and slowly they learn how to, do the spiritual balancing. So, in a sense, that's also shamanism.
Yes, I completely agree. And what's happening today? Like, as I said, now the word shamanic, you can see it way often. And that just means, people start exploring this tradition more,
Well, I
learning a
don't,
little bit more about it.
I cannot say, but I would say that it is a bit unfortunate that people are too quick to mix things. Usually, Dr. Herner says master two systems first, and then you can mix them. And I think that Kung Fu teachers would say the same thing master lineage, and then you can combine them. But if you're not a master, which is what typically is going on in Bali today, people take a couple weeks of workshops here or there, and then suddenly they've got rainbow, mystery, dolphin, shamanic shampoo school. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I'm guessing they have not mastered those things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But what I'm trying to say is that the shamanic tradition is making its way back.
Oh, yes.
That's what
Absolutely.
I'm trying to say. It's coming
Oh,
back. We can see it in this shampoo schools, but also this but which we don't recommend to go. But also we can see that like I can learn from you today, right? And
and
it's
you'll from the spirits.
yes, through your guidance, for example. So shamanic tradition is starting to recover its authority or present in our lives today. While the world is developing AI, technology, and all those things, this, ancient, like the first spiritual healing tradition also is making its way back today.
Right.
And how would you
Sorry, go on.
endorse that? How would you say
Mhm.
why we actually want to really have it back in our lives?
Well, let's take a little bit of a look at history. This shamanism is not New Age. In fact, it's Stone Age. So we are really going back to our roots, back to the beginning, back to before. I mean, okay, Hinduism, Taoism, 3, 4, 5,000 years old. That's a newborn baby compared to shamanism. Shamans have been doing miracles for tens of thousands of years. So this is not something new or strange. In fact, we're in very good company. If anything, we've actually become a little bit distracted with too much information, and getting back to the basics is something very important. Now, in Europe, when Rome decided, oh, this new, what I would consider shamanic religion is getting too popular because of this Jesus shaman did so many miracles, we'd better convert over to this because we want everybody on the same page. But then Rome decided, well, everybody's telling different stories about this great shaman Jesus who lived. So we better gather all the stories together and make a nice packaged religion so that people can just believe it. And then the Roman Empire can all be on the same page. Oh, well, we then need a priesthood because most people can't read and write. So we need a priesthood to interpret this. So then what used to be in Aramaic and Greek, suddenly Latin became the holy language, which makes no sense at all. But but then there were still shamans all over Europe. I mean, there were healers, there were mystics, there were wizards. So they began to persecute these autonomous healers. So spiritual autonomy was no longer okay. You got to bow to Rome. Okay. Then Stalin did the same thing. Then Mao did the same thing in China. We're all going to be on the same page. We're going to get rid of this superstitious mumbo jumbo. And they threw it all out. And in fact, murdered them or sent them to the gulag. So the Vatican did the same thing in the New World. They went into South America. Anybody who wasn't on board with the imperial religion, they were a problem. But this has been going on all over. There were purges in China as well. Any shamans who were inconvenient, they were dealt with. In Uzbekistan, the shamans used to journey very regularly to the upper world. But then Islam came in and said, no, 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 only Muhammad can journey to the upper world and you can't. And they say, well, yeah, but I was just in the upper world with Muhammad the other day. Whoa, that's inconvenient to organized religion. So again, organized religion doesn't like spiritual autonomy. They don't want people getting their own answers because then you won't go to the church, the mosque, the temple and pay them.
Yeah.
Now,
So why do we want shamanism to come back today?
oh, it's never been needed more
Tell
because
me why.
we don't need more belief systems. Look at us. We're maybe the sickest we've ever been. We're destroying the planet as quickly as we possibly can. We're poisoning our water, poisoning the air, poisoning our food. We're living totally out of balance. We have so many spiritual problems, and now they're becoming all physical problems. There's more chronic illness now today than there ever was before. And we just keep saying, well, we'll get another pill, another pill, and another pill, so that the market share is going to go up for big pharma, and
Big
we can get
pharma
more
is
money because money is going to make you happy, right? And we're destroying the world to get something that makes us more unhappy. We are in a spiritual madness right now. So shamanism can show a better way. We can get out of the matrix for a while. Okay, so this is where I need to explain. We are in the middle world. Okay, the middle world is called the pain world, the confusion world. Buddhists or Hindus call it the samsara world, the world of illusion, the world of conflict, the world of competition, the world of scarcity. That's the middle world. Let's not judge it as good or bad. It's just here we are. This is it. We're in it. We can talk philosophy about why we came in it or why it exists. That's a better question, actually, for people outside the matrix, for the intelligences, the cosmic intelligences outside the matrix, because inside you're just going to get philosophy and not real answers. Philosophy is mostly mind stuff rather than actual spiritual knowledge. Sometimes they overlap, but not always. In fact, usually not always. Usually, I should say.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Middle
so
world.
a
This middle
huge
world
topic.
looks like a big med hospital.
Yes, some have said we are the psychiatric unit of the universe.
Totally.
So,
I agree with
Colonel,
that.
the mad souls have been sent to learn how to get along, and when we can get along, we can graduate from the middle world. So it's a bit of a negative way to look at it, but it's probably pretty accurate. Um,
Realistic.
so, when sensitive people, they come to a point in their lives when just getting more is not enough. It doesn't satisfy the soul. Just getting more money, more food, more power. And it's like, okay, well, this is an endless hamster on the wheel. You're always running after something or running away from something. So fear, desire cycle. So we come to a point to like, wait a minute, this fear, desire cycle is causing suffering in me and everyone else. What's the bigger picture? Why are we doing this? What is happening? Why did we come here? What's this for? Now, these are the questions very, very applicable to shamanism because the shamans want to go find out what is this? What is this for? Is this some kind of training camp? Is this a prison planet? What is this place? Also, they feel the suffering of other beings and they have empathy, they have sympathy, they want to help. Others' pains become their pain. And so they seek healing. They want to alleviate pain and suffering. So many people go into the helping professions because they feel the pain of the world. It's a good reason to go into shamanism. We need more spiritual healers. Now, can you become a shaman in 1 2 day course? Of course not. You cannot go to medical school either in one 2 day course. But you can get started. You can learn shamanic journeying and you can, step by step progress. But if you go to a music school and you say, I just bought a new violin, when am I going to play in Carnegie Hall? Okay. Or, when am I going to be a famous violinist? Well, of course, the teacher cannot say because it's going to depend on what is your motivation, how much are you going to practice, do you have natural talent, do you have the space in your life to go that far? It's impossible to say. Any music school can say, well, we're going to teach you this foundation work. You'll be able to certainly play to some degree, but how far you go is going to be between you and the universe, between you and the violin, between you and inspiration, between you and intuition. So the shaman, again, is the intermediary. How well can you connect to the forces of the universe to be able to do it for service, not for yourself, but for service for others? Now, you can ask for healing for yourself, of course, too. But shamans are typically working for others. So shamans give up a portion of their personal life in order to serve their community. And that's why in indigenous communities, being a shaman is not something cool or fashionable, or it has nothing to do with DJs or rave parties, and usually not anything to do with drugs either. In fact, in indigenous communities, when a child or a teenager starts to show shamanic inclinations or shamanic talent, the family's horrified because they don't want their child to have to deal with all the weird things, all the difficulties. Also, shamans suffer because shamans have to be transformed and able to be the intermediary for cosmic forces and their community. So it is definite, now it's all fashionable. You go here and there to all night rave party and do lots of drugs, and people think that's shamanism. No, there may be some shamanistic elements, of course, and there is an exploration period. But the point is, what is the purpose? What is the intention? If the intention is just to have weird experiences, you're probably not going to go very far.
Yeah,
So,
that makes a lot of sense. And I'm seeing that in the future, these two realms can co-live together, the advanced technology AI kind of thing, and also advanced spiritual technology, which is shamanism. And on a practical level, how would shamanism, like classic shamanism, not the rave party drug shamanism, I don't even know that it's shaman, but how a classic shamanism today can start changing this middle world and maybe bringing some wisdom and some healing into the middle world? Well, most of us are literally every day struggling.
well, I think it already has. I mean, the shamanic revolution, if you want to call it, is already happening. Of course, the big pharma doesn't like it because that means people are going to be stronger and they're not going to be dependent on their drugs. So, big pharma is normally against any kind of natural or holistic healing. They don't say that, but they are, because the bottom line is profits. The bottom line is not healing. The point is continuing customers. You don't want to heal somebody of something if you can get them hooked on your drug for the rest of their lives. So they don't want any of this. They work against it. And sadly enough, people invest mutual funds, and those mutual funds put money in big pharma, and then big pharma lobbies to prevent any kind of natural healing like crazy. It's a constant battle in many countries. I don't know about all countries, but in many countries, it's a never ending battle. Big pharma wants you to have to come to them for a pill for everything.
Our sickness profits these organizations. Our
Yeah.
sickness, illness, disease profits these organizations. And through spiritual healing, for example, through shamanic tradition, how can we really improve our well-being, improve our health, improve our
Well, just
spiritual vitality?
sure. Well, the through the practice of shamanism, we come to know the spiritual intelligences that exist outside of the matrix, outside of the middle world. They have power, they have knowledge that they are willing to share with us because they're compassionate. These intelligences have been here before. They've been in the matrix before. They're now outside of it. You can call them Earth School graduates. You can call them angels. You can call them what have you, the ancestors. There are many, many names. Bodhisattvas, angels, sub-angels, middle management Buddhas, super Buddhas, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole, I want to say, hierarchy in a positive sense. Angels, archangels, and on, archai, and on up to seraphim. These are ranks of spiritual intelligences. We can get in touch with them. But in the beginning, we normally get in touch with our guardian spirits. In most traditions, they talk about when a child is born, we're assigned one or two guardian angels, or indigenous peoples will say guardian spirits, because childhood is so dangerous and so risky for a child that without your guardian spirits, you would not have survived childhood. And we call this infant mortality. In many cultures, if you reach 3 years old or 5 years old, there's a big party because you're probably going to live if you make it to 3 or 5 or 7 or what have you. It depends on the culture. So that's something that a shaman can do is they can make sure that you have your guardian spirits. Now, are children interested in hearing about Buddha or Jesus?
I think so.
No.
No?
Really? I don't. If I talk about Buddha or Jesus, most children are bored and they're looking over at the cat or the dog. No, children love animals.
Yeah.
Children love animals. They want to hear stories about animals. They want to make sounds like animals. They want to have stuffed animals. They want to watch cartoons about animals, and they have no problem hearing about the crow said to the bear, and the bear said to the fox. And they're, yes, you know. Now it's only when kids get a little bit older that they say, no, wait a minute, foxes don't talk, you know. That's that's when the left brain starts to get developed. But children are in touch with their guardian spirits who normally appear as animals. Now, I don't mean that this is some kind of lower bestial thing. This is normal. Most spiritual traditions have actual animal spirits in them. So in Hinduism, the deities they have is called a mount. So Vishnu rides Garuda, Ganesh rides a rat, others ride a lion or something else. So this is a remnant from a much older shamanism. Or in front of temples all over Asia, you see guardian spirits out front. Well, those are symbols for not only guarding the temple, but we each have guardian spirits, and they are a power source for us. So how many people as a child, put stuffed animals around their bed to protect them when they sleep? This
But
is
it's so
very,
funny
very
as you're talking to this, I remember you speaking to this during the course. And I know that my case is a bit out of context because I didn't have animals as a kid and I didn't have stuffed animals as a kid. I actually didn't have any toys whatsoever. I wasn't interested.
Mhm,
But I sensed what now I understand what I sensed
mhm.
was an angelic presence.
Well,
So
that
I
can be a
was,
guardian spirit too. Yeah,
yeah, I was very, very little and I was going to the balcony, going to the corner of the balcony, and I was talking to a being or a presence that I was relating with as my angel. And my family had never used the word angel or Jesus was not in our house. The religion, it was post Soviet Union, Ukraine. It was completely non-religious, non-spiritual whatsoever. And I had this very strong relationship with this presence. So it's
good.
just interesting to hear like children grow and to see that this spirit that you're mentioning was
Mhm.
already like you're saying with me all along every step of the way. I felt it,
Right.
I knew
You were
it,
born.
I could talk to it.
Good. Good. It's called Holy Guardian Spirit in other schools. They can say guardian angels as well. It doesn't have to always appear as animals, but in the indigenous concept, they usually do. Can appear as humans too. But again, these are spiritual intelligences. They are not necessarily, they're not ghosts. In fact, ghosts are trouble. Ghosts are human souls that did not leave the middle world after their body died and they're wandering around what's going on, wondering what is going on. So they're lost, they're confused, sometimes angry, sometimes sad. So working with ghosts isn't going to get you anywhere. And in fact, part of the shaman's job is to help ghosts to move out of the middle world. If you don't get out of the middle world, you can't come back in and get a new body. There's only one way to get a body if you're a ghost, and that's to move in on somebody. That
That's
would be
right.
called spiritual intrusion. So, but that's a whole other topic. That's advanced work. That's only in our 3-year program, which is 6 weeks long. It's not, but it's spread over 3 years. So it's 2 weeks every year. And in fact, I'm starting one day after tomorrow, right here in Bali. I'm doing 3 in a row because they're overlapping. So I
Well,
have one in English beginning day after tomorrow. Then I have the second year meeting of the Chinese language group. And then after that, I have the third meeting of the previous English group that began 3 years ago. So they'll be finishing.
Well, this is so beautiful to know that you are cooking in your kitchen people that will be advanced in this work. And hopefully, they will be sharing this work and this approach to healing with the world. Like we're saying, there is the shamanic revolution is happening already, right?
Mm,
And even why I'm doing this interview with you is to really start bringing it out there and bring it out of the closet and
mm,
remove the mumbo jumbo perception of that because we really need to get real about this and that you feels are a great thing when like you said you're in crisis but ultimately we need to understand things for what they are and go a little bit deeper why we are not well for example.
mhm. Well,
But yeah,
shamanism is the earliest holistic medicine. Shamans were the first psychologists. Shamans did not develop a philosophy because they didn't need one. They were experiencing the universe directly. You don't need a philosophy if you're experiencing the universe directly. Philosophy is intellectual. That's just, it's speculation. Shamans don't speculate. They journey through the universe, they journey through the spiritual worlds, and they know by firsthand experience. Now, that can take a lifetime. I mean, in India, they call them lokas, the realms. In Christianity, there are many mansions in the house of my Father, Jesus said. Mansions meaning levels. There are many dimensions. There are many spiritual dimensions. Um, it's really more than a single lifetime. Yeah, it takes more than a lifetime to explore them all. But we have it forever to explore it. We don't have a body forever, but our souls can explore those realms timelessly. That's
Um,
where we came from.
yes. And one of my questions to you also now, therapy is becoming also very popular. Whether before it was only for people that's completely out of it and need to be hospitalized almost, they go to therapy. Now it becomes more normal to do therapy. And how do you see intersection of shamanic way of working with
Mhm.
our soul and our psyche, which normally is the same
I
thing?
think
Uh,
I think therapy is great, especially since we're in such a mess. Uh, uh, I don't think shamanism is necessarily going to solve all problems, at least not the old classic shamanism, because we've become a very sophisticated, neurotic, psychotic society now. So that's why we're going to have more sophisticated methods. You know, in the indigenous context, the shaman or shamanic practitioners within the community were keeping the tribe psychologically, mentally, spiritually healthy. And so they didn't have these 10, 20 years deep neuroses that need to be untangled by a professional therapist. But I think that shamanism can actually empower us to even improve the efficiency of therapies, even develop new therapies. I might even argue that most of the new therapies that are coming around are leaning more and more toward the spiritual, which means the shamanic, because that's what shamanism is. It's the original spirituality of humankind. So it's going to come together anyway. I think we're leaving behind the old, purely intellectual stuff already. And most therapists you go to now, they're not purely Freudian in origin, or they're not purely behavioral. We're getting away from it because we see that it's very partial, very limited in its scope.
Totally agree. And what comes to me is one expression that I heard is that we really truly can't fully heal without some sort of element of spirituality. What do you think about it?
Well, because spirituality is who we are. That's who we are at an essence. So, I mean, to try to remove spirituality doesn't make any sense. That spirituality is life force. I mean, you know, science, as great a tool as it has been, is a very poor master. Science should be a tool. Soul should be driving the car. The left brain can be a fantastic tool to record, to calculate, to analyze, to categorize, but the left brain should not be driving humanity's vehicle into the future. And that is why, you know, AI could be a great tool for research, for synthesizing information, but we should not hand the reins over to a very sophisticated plagiarism program. We need to keep the reins, the ethical reins, the moral reins. So this is what 2001: A Space Odyssey was all about. 1969 film based on the book by Arthur C. Clarke. It is the left brain has gone insane in a sense and has completely taken over. The Matrix is the same. Matrix is a war between AI and human beings. AI decides humans are dirty, they're smelly, they're sloppy, they're problematic. They don't even get along, so maybe they should be eradicated. That would be the worst case scenario. That's the left brain gone insane. But most of us, or many of us anyway, that have had left brain educations, we've been told, oh, forget about intuition, forget about soul knowledge, forget about trusting yourself, only trust the left brain science calculations and the rational mind. And people are unhappier than ever, ever, ever before.
Thank you for saying that, because that was one of my questions slash comments to what would you say to radical skeptics that might be listening to this and thinking, what kind of spirituality? But
Mhm.
also there is one, just the last piece, just there is one confusion. I think still there is one big confusion. A lot of people now are sons and daughters of their parents that were very Catholic, very Christian, very religious in a negative sense of it. And a
Mhm.
lot of us today have a little bit of a negative feeling towards spirituality because it is mixed with religion. So a lot of people still think that spirituality is a religion and religion is spirituality. And I believe that creates a blockage towards people opening themselves to what we are talking about because they
Sure.
don't want to deal with a religion thing. While
And I felt the same way as a kid. I felt that religion was just a method for crowd control. And then how can anybody be so stupid as to believe that nonsense in the Bible or in other religious systems? Especially the Abrahamic religions tend to be very focused on this just believe, just believe. But if you look at the prophets, the ancient Jewish prophets, the Christian prophets, the Muslim prophets, they were shamans. They were doing magic and miracles, and they were getting revelations. They were connecting to the archangels. I mean, Muhammad was channeling Archangel Gabriel. That's classic shamanism. But boy, you say that now and everybody gets pretty upset. So I also rejected, especially the Abrahamic religions when I was younger. And that's why I came to Asia 41 years ago, because I was interested in Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, the real spirituality, which is what I felt it was. But I have come to appreciate that the roots of Western religions are in shamanism. And to me, again, I see Jesus as a master shaman. And in fact, almost everything he did and said in the New Testament, if you actually read it carefully, is being performed by shamans right here in Bali, in Australia, in the far north, in the far south, in the jungle. Um, So I kind of came back around to appreciating the situation. In fact, just a short story. Uh, Alicia, one of our most illustrious instructors with the foundation, she died just a few years ago at age 84. She was a Mexican mother superior in a Catholic nunnery. So she's the top. She's the abbotess for a Catholic nunnery. And she has these dreams of animals coming to her and telling her she needs to heal the people in her community. So she thought, I'm going crazy. She went to the local bishop and she asked, what do I do? What these animal spirits are coming to me telling me to heal people. But and so the fortunately it was in Mexico. If it had been in Italy, it might have been a different story. In Mexico, so the bishop said, well, I can't find anything in the Bible that says you can't heal the people. So why don't you try it? So she did. And it worked. And the people were getting better and better and better. And she got so busy because people were coming to her for healing, she gave up being a nun. And then she realized, I don't know enough because I'm just being taught by these few spirits. I think there's more. So somebody said, seek out Michael Harner in California. He is the world's top expert in shamanism. He's not only an academic professor of anthropology, chairman of the Department of Anthropology, but he is a practicing shaman. Go see him. So she did, and she became one of our faculty members. And she had been living with the Yaqui Indians for 7 years doing healing. But then she got more training and she became even a more powerful healer. So she was one of my teachers as well,
That's a beautiful
Alicia Gay.
story. That's a very
Yeah.
beautiful story.
But also, she never gave up loving Jesus or Moses or any of the great prophets, but she just gave up the church.
So yeah, that's basically the point, that we don't necessarily need to mix the church with spirituality. Not necessarily. And like you're teaching and sharing with us, so we can experience it directly ourselves instead of believing in something. We can actually have our direct experience and full stop there, and not philosophize too much about it or
Mhm.
read books.
People regularly meet angels or archangels in the upper or lower worlds, regularly meet Jesus or Moses or even Muhammad. Uh, that's normal. Nothing strange at all about it. But if you go tell that to the local priest, they think you're crazy. You've lost it.
Right.
Anyway, we'll get back to it. I have confidence there will be a golden age again. It might take a while to get there, maybe 150 years or so, but there will be a golden age again.
Right. And you are contributing already to that.
I'm playing a small part. Yeah.
Yes. So, Kevin, anything you want to share with people who were listening to this, if they are interested on learning more about it or experiencing directly? Um,
Okay. Well, the foundation offers a series of 2-day courses in America, in Europe, in Asia, and in Latin America. Latin America obviously will be in Spanish. Europe, they teach in many languages. Here in Asia too, we mostly work in English and Chinese, but I'm hoping we'll have courses in Hindi and Thai and Indonesian, other languages in the future. If you're here in Asia, you can take a look at my website, www.shamanism-asia.com. So shamanism-asia.com. For the schedule, otherwise, just look up FSS America, FSS Europe, FSS Latin America if you speak Spanish. And you can find a full course schedule. Of course, we also have the most advanced course, which is what we call the 3-year course, which is a 6-week course of advanced initiations where we go much deeper. And we actually are seeking transformation into a real in-depth shamanic practitioner. But you can learn a lot even from, we have 8, 9, 10 2-day courses. And these are very condensed. You would have to hang out with indigenous shamans for months, maybe years, maybe decades before they would teach you that much. So I want to thank actually Michael Harner because he distilled and condensed his 50 years of work with shamans all around the world, uh, shamanically, but also academically, and that we can get in 2 days what would normally take a very long time of living in the jungle and crawling through the mud and the snakes, and you have to get interpreters. I mean, you might have to spend $100,000 to even get close to what you can learn in 2 days, 4 days, 6 days, 8 days. So it is a modernized version. I could even say Michael Harner is a kind of reformer because he's really interested in the essence of the practice to serve humanity. Whereas cultural shamanisms, as great as they are, they're often very ethnocentric. They're often only for the tribe. They're often only the tribal spirits, and they have very fixed, I might even say, dogmatic ways of doing things. That's okay for that tribe. That is their tradition, and we respect that. So we don't want core shamanism to replace cultural shamanisms. No, no, no. We are still learning from cultural shamanisms. But core shamanism is a universal human shamanism that we can take into the future because most of us, 95% or 99% of the population, has lost track or lost connection to our spiritual roots. So we have to do it from scratch. Now, if you go live with a cultural tribe, I mean, a cultural shamanism in an indigenous tribe, you learn the language, you're initiated by those people, you meet their helping spirits, you do things the way they do, then by all means, you can practice that shamanism. And if they give you permission to teach, well, then you have permission to teach. But most people don't have the time and money to quit their jobs, go live in the jungle for 2 or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or longer in order to do it that way. So,
Yes, it's true. I have 100% agree with you. It's a distilled version of knowledge, very straight to the point, very experiential, very do it yourself right now and see and feel for yourself rather than just learning something from the book. It's just to go journey and find your own answers. And I think it's for those people that are in healing professions and also just curious souls that are, you know, want to have an alternative time and learn something about themselves and develop their spiritual abilities and their psychic abilities at the end of the day. So I think this is beautiful, easy to digest, great to experience, and thank you for doing that. And also, hopefully at some point maybe we can bring you to Hong Kong. I think
I teach
Hong
in
Kong
Taiwan
needs
very
benefit. Ah,
I teach in Taiwan and Chinese very often,
right. So
every March, every March. Otherwise, most Hong Kong folks are gonna have to go to Chiang Mai or Bali.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I have a full set of courses in November, January, and February in Thailand.
Yes,
So
yes,
just
yeah.
look at the schedule. Yeah.
Kevin, this has been very informative and very refreshing. Thank you for doing your work and cultivating in us this direct spiritual autonomy. I feel this is the true power at the end of the day.
Thank you. Well, we aspire to be a kind of university of shamanism, not a dogmatic fixed system.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you feel called to deepen this journey, you'll find everything you need in the show notes, including a link to a book complimentary call with me and more details about my work and today's guest. May you continue walk your path with clarity, courage, and self-led grace. Until soon.